Okay, all right, good. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. So I'd like to introduce you to the practice that I do and some of us do here. And it's known as TWIM, that's Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation. And that's just a fancy way of saying samatha vipassana. That is to say, we are using mindfulness of our thoughts and our experiences mentally with a calm reflection. That's the way I understand it. And the whole process of meditation is to collect the mind around an object. And that object can be anything. In the Pali Canon, there are different kinds of objects of meditation. Sometimes people use the breath. There are recollections of the Buddha, of the Dhamma, and the Sangha that helps the person become joyful when they use that as an object of meditation. Some people use the visualization of the decaying process of a body, and that helps to start to de-identify with the attachments to the body and so on. And so the Buddha prescribed different kinds of meditation techniques depending upon a person's temperament and their personality. So for some people who were very much attached, for example, to the body, attached to the senses and so on, he would prescribe things like the recollection of the body in various forms of decay, or being mindful of the internal aspects of the body, realizing that this is all just an impersonal process. And for others who were speculative in nature, who had a restless mind and so on, he sometimes prescribed breath meditation because it was a good way of centering the mind, let's say, around the breath. But generally what we found is the brahmaviharas are very effective in collecting the mind for a few reasons. Number one, it feels really good. And because of that, it keeps the mind happy. It keeps the mind uplifted. It keeps the mind enthusiastic about the practice. And it's much easier for a mind to focus on something that it enjoys and that is constantly of interest to the mind, rather than just simple breath. Now, it's not to say one is more effective than the other. It's just that in our experience, what we found is that when it comes to TWIM, the brahmaviharas help one to start to, first and foremost, let go of a lot of the hindrances that might arise, especially ill will and aggression and so on and so forth. And what you'll find if you continue to progress in this meditation is that the brahmaviharas start with loving kindness, and loving kindness is a feeling of warmth. It's a feeling of being content with yourself, really loving yourself, being kind to yourself, and ultimately sending it out to a spiritual friend. That then gets into compassion. So it gradually transforms into compassion, which is another way of saying that you see and you understand the other being suffering, and you understand that it's their responsibility to let go of that suffering, but you're there for that person in supporting them, in helping them, because it wouldn't make any sense for somebody to take away the tools that they could have and the ways that they could learn to let go of that suffering. If you do it for somebody else, it makes no sense. You would want to learn for yourself. That then graduates into mudita, which is known as empathetic joy. And this is a joy that you feel when, for example, a colleague gets a promotion, or your child graduates from high school or college, or any kind of wholesome celebration of another person's success is really mudita. And these are graduated processes that happen through longer and longer periods of meditative practice. And finally, there's equanimity. Equanimity is generally understood as uh, being non-attached or detached from your environment. But I would go a little farther than that and say it's not necessarily just detachment, but it's accepting what is arising, whether it's good or bad. And so that's really the true meaning of renunciation, is not to have indifference or aversion towards the unwholesome or the negative events in your life, but accepting the reality that this is what it is and not becoming affected by it, letting the mind see it as it is. So this is what's known in Pali as yata buddha dasana. That is to say, seeing reality as it is without any attachment, without any kind of identification. So that's just a brief introduction into the brahmaviharas. But coming to the practical aspect of it, I want to introduce you to the actual meditation practice. And this first part of the meditation, which we'll do together, is coming from the Visuddhimagga, but regardless of where it comes from, it's very effective practice in helping to uplift the mind, in helping to keep the mind collected, in sharpening one's mindfulness. And the way you start off with is, you can start off with phrases. You could say in your own way, may I be happy, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering, and really feel it. And the way it's instructed for beginners is you feel that in the center of your chest. You feel that warmth in your heart. And it's just a mind that is all accepting of whatever it is. And it feels kind to itself. It feels happy for itself, just for the sake of being happy. There's no conditions there. So you can use phrases like, may I be happy, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering. But what also helps is using some kind of warm imagery. And what that means is maybe thinking about a very happy memory, a pleasant memory that you had in the past. Not necessarily a memory related to the six sense bases, not related to the sensual realms, but just something that's very pure, wholesome, something that puts a smile on your face quite naturally. It could also be just a visualization of something that makes you happy, like the image of holding a very cute baby in your arms, or the image of kittens, or a puppy, or whatever works for you. Just let that feeling arise. And when that feeling arises, you feel it in the center of your chest. You feel that warmth, and you allow the mind to rest in that. So there's nothing else that you have to do except be observing, be mindful, be aware of that feeling of loving kindness towards yourself. And in that process, you do it for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, then you think about a spiritual friend that you want to send that loving kindness to. So generally speaking, this spiritual friend will be of the same sex, of the same gender. They should be alive. So they should be somebody who you know personally. It would help actually if it was somebody you knew personally, somebody you admired, somebody who you think of that automatically puts a smile on your face and you have really good wishes for them. It should not be a family member at the moment. In terms of the beginning part of the practice, it should be a spiritual friend. Later on, as you progress, there will be instructions where you can do it to different family members and different people in your life, depending on who they are and what relationship you have with them. But for the purposes of this meditation, the basics is feel that loving kindness in your heart, allow the awareness of that loving kindness to be there. And then after 10 minutes, send it out to a spiritual friend. And the way to send it out, you can feel like, like the aura of a candle flame, it's starting to arise and starting to, let's say, envelop the spiritual friend of yours, or you can visualize the spiritual friend in front of you, and you can use, the feeling to connect with their heart. Whatever works for you, just do whatever works for you. It's not very clear cut. It's more of a feeling meditation rather than an analytical, very precise meditation. So it's all about really feeling that warmth and then allowing the mind to become purified and clarified through that experience. Now, while you're doing this, there is going to be inevitably some hindrances that arise. There will be some distractions that arise. There might be thoughts about, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this meditation? Is this working? What's going on here? I don't like this. All kinds of thoughts might arise. And these are what we call hindrances. There are 5 types of hindrances. And generally speaking, it's not necessary at the moment to know what those 5 types are, but I will just say they're basically sensual craving, ill will, doubt, restlessness, and sloth and torpor. And just briefly, sensual craving is, for example, while you're sitting in meditation and you're hearing the clock tick, your mind becomes pulled towards that. That's a sensual attachment. Your mind has now become attached to that sound, become distracted, and it's no longer on your object of meditation, which is loving kindness. Or when it comes to ill will. Now that's the thing with loving kindness, the whole point of loving kindness is that it's an antidote to ill will. But there might be things like the distraction again of the clock, or maybe somebody clears their throat and you get distracted and the mind gets irritated. That's a form of aversion, a form of ill will. When you think about doubt, that's again like things like, what am I doing here? Am I doing the practice correctly? Is this right for me? All kinds of thoughts like that. When it comes to restlessness, there is a certain kind of agitation in the mind. There are lots of background thoughts that might be stirring in the mind as you're meditating. And what can happen is that the attention becomes scattered and goes to those thoughts. And then that restlessness then drives forward the mind, and you're no longer with your object of meditation. Sloth and torpor is because of lack of energy, lack of interest in your meditation object. And sloth and torpor really is where the mind starts to feel very dull. And it's like a very sort of sleepy state, not necessarily that you'll fall into sleep, but more so that the mind will be just lethargic. It will be slower. You won't be able to focus or collect the mind as best as possible. So whatever hindrances arise, let them be there. That's the first thing you need to understand, is that hindrances are actually good because they are your teachers. They provide you and they shed a light on where your attachments lie, where the mind is most attached to, where the mind is most interested in, what is it averting, what is it afraid of, and all kinds of things like this. And so once you're able to shed light on these attachments and these aversions, then you're able to let them go. That's the only way you can let go, is to know what it is that you have to let go. And that's only through the process of recognizing that a hindrance has arisen. Now, I spoke about recognizing, and this is part of what we call the 6R process. It's a very easy way to remember this process, but what the 6 R's is essentially right effort. Right effort within the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'll expand on that a little bit later. But I just want to go through the process of the 6 R's. So I mentioned recognize. And what recognize means is, let's say you are meditating and you have the feeling of loving kindness and all is well and the mind is resting in that loving kindness, is aware of that loving kindness, and everything seems to be flowing. And then suddenly the mind kind of deviates, and you're not even aware of the fact that the mind started to deviate and is thinking about something else, like, what am I going to make for dinner? What do I have to do tomorrow? Or, is this really working? What is all of this stuff? And all kinds of thoughts. As your attention becomes attracted to those thoughts, then you are no longer meditating. Now your mind is distracted. So what do? You use mindfulness to recognize that you were distracted. And what this does is, in that process of recognizing that the mind was distracted, it stops the distraction right there and then. Now that flow, that energy of the distraction no longer starts to flow through your mind. Once you have recognized it, then the second R is to release. Release means your awareness and your attention was deviated from the loving kindness, and now it's on the distraction. You are releasing your awareness and attention away from that distraction, and you're bringing it back to, let's say, the present moment. That is to say, you're bringing it back to the awareness of your mind and body as it is right now. That then brings us to the third step, which is actually very crucial. And that step is relax. So this comes from the understanding in the suttas of tranquilizing the bodily formations, tranquilizing the mental formations. You see, without complicating the subject, formations are essentially the effects of our thoughts or our verbal actions or our physical actions. And they are these tendencies that arise in the mind to give rise to certain kinds of thoughts, to give rise to certain kinds of intentions and ideas and concepts. So if you feed into the ill will against the hindrance, or if you feed into the attention to the hindrance, then what you're doing is you're strengthening certain kinds of formations, certain kinds of habits to be continuing to be distracted. Whereas if you make that change by relaxing those formations and letting them go, then you're allowing the mind the space. And really what you're going to find is, if you're doing this practice correctly, when you do the relaxed step, your mind feels like very spacious. It feels like an open sky without any clouds. And this is really what one can call is the mundane nirvana, the mundane nirvana, which is to say the cessation of any kind of suffering. In that state of pure mind, there is no suffering, there is no attachment, there's no identification. So when you're able to relax and let go, having relaxed, you see that the mind is relaxed. And in doing so, the mind naturally brings up this smile. And that's another crucial step. That's the next R, which is actually re-smile. So what that means is, in the beginning of the meditation, along with, let's say, using verbalizations or using positive imagery, you also use a small Buddha smile. If you see the Buddha, most of the images of the Buddha, you'll see him smiling. And when he's smiling, it's because he's teaching us that this meditation, this life of the Dhamma, this practice of the Eightfold Path, culminates in a transcendental kind of happiness. And the smile is a reflection of that. So just put a little Buddha smile when you meditate, when you start your meditation. You can smile with your eyes, smile with your heart. Now, what happens is when you get distracted, you stop smiling usually. And you'll find when you go through the process of recognizing the hindrance, letting it go by releasing your attention to it, relaxing the mind, you then bring your attention back to your mouth and really intend that smile. And by using that smile, you use that as an anchor to bring up the loving kindness again. And that is to return back to your object of meditation. So that's the next R in that process. The final step in the 6R process, the sixth R, is repeat. And that's basically anytime you get distracted again, you repeat that whole process. Now, why is it that the 6 R's are crucial and emphasized? They're not just something that's made up. They've been formulated in this way to best assimilate it in your mind and best to be able to exercise it in the effective manner. But there is a root in the Dhamma when it comes to the 6 R's. And the way I like to explain it is, you don't need to understand it right now, but if you have some kind of understanding of the enlightenment factors, some kind of understanding of the Four Noble Truths, some kind of understanding of right effort, you'll understand the context of why we use the 6 R's. First and foremost, the 6 R's are basically the Eightfold Path encapsulated. And I'll explain how that is. It's because it is right effort, and right effort is at the heart of the practice. It's from right effort that you go from wrong view to right view. You go from wrong intention to right intention. You go from wrong speech to right speech. You go from wrong behavior to right behavior. You go from wrong livelihood to right livelihood. You go from wrong mindfulness to right mindfulness. And finally, you go from wrong collectiveness or meditation to right meditation, the way that it's been prescribed by the Buddha, let's say. And right effort has 4 components to it. So the 6 R's are intertwined within these 4 components of right effort. The first effort within this right effort process is to prevent unwholesome states from arising. So unwholesome states are hindrances, distractions, things that you don't want in your mind right now because you're trying too hard to focus on the object of meditation. You don't want to focus so hard. You want to allow the mind to just land on the feeling of loving kindness and let it just ride through and allow the awareness to ride through. So, but if you notice that the mind becomes too concentrated, too focused, then you just relax and you recognize that there was a hindrance. So when you do that, when you recognize that there was a hindrance, you have prevented the unwholesome states from further arising. This is what I mean when I say that when you recognize, you stop that energy and flow of those hindrances, of those distractions. The second part of right effort is to abandon those unwholesome states. That happens when you release your attention to those unwholesome states, release your attention to those distractions. In releasing your attention, you're abandoning those unwholesome states. And then by relaxing, you're tranquilizing any of the effects, mentally speaking, through formations that arose due to the attention to those hindrances. Then you manifest or you generate a wholesome state. That is the third right effort. And the way you manifest that is through the smile. Like I said, the smile is your anchor point in which you're able to bring up the loving kindness again. It's a reminder. The more you connect your smile with loving kindness, the easier it's going to be for you in the practice to be able to just smile and reignite your loving kindness. So this is the third right effort of generating that loving kindness. Then to return to your object of meditation, which is resting your awareness back on the loving kindness, is the fourth aspect, which is to say the maintenance of those wholesome states. And then repeating that whole process helps you to continue to activate right effort in every time that you're distracted. So this is one way to contextualize the 6 R's through the Dhamma. Another way is to understand it from the 7 factors of awakening. As we understand 7 factors, they are mindfulness, they are discernment, or you could say it's known as brahmaviharas, which is to say a mind that investigates different kinds of states. But the way I like to translate it is discernment of states, just being understanding of what state has arisen. That gives rise to energy, which is to say this joyful interest in the practice, a certain level of enthusiasm in the practice, which gives rise to natural joy. That joy then gives rise to tranquility. From that tranquility, you have collectedness of mind, which is actually the meditation. From that collectedness, you have equanimity, which is what I was talking about earlier, which is to be able to see things as they really are, without having an agenda, without having an intention, without trying to control the situation, without trying to hold on to the situation or whatever it might be. So that is true equanimity. So now you understand these, let's say we just listed out these 7 enlightenment factors. Now I can contextualize the 6 R's through this process of the enlightenment factors. For example, when you recognize that there was a hindrance, you bring back the mindfulness. You bring back the awareness, the observation of your object of meditation. When you do that, you are also discerning, or you're investigating your mind to see that indeed the mind is no longer on its object of meditation. Now it is attending to a hindrance. It is distracted. In recognizing that, when you make the effort to release your awareness and your attention from the hindrance and bring it back, you're utilizing energy. So that is to say, you become more interested in the actual practice, and you use the energy or you use the effort to make that practice stronger, so to speak. You make that effort to return to your object by first releasing your awareness. Then that gives rise to joy. But here it's a little different. First, you relax, which gives you the tranquility. Once you have that tranquility, there is a joy that naturally arises. So what I like to say is there's an interconnection between being relaxed and being joyful. When you are relaxed, it's easier for joy to come on. And when you're truly joyful, you are actually relaxed in that moment. There is an interconnection, an interdependency between the two. So even though first you relax, what will naturally arise is a tendency to smile, which is then that activation of the joy factor. So you're activating the tranquility factor and then the joy factor. Then making the effort to return this mind back to the object of meditation gives rise to natural collectedness of mind, which is the meditation. And when you're aware of this and you repeat that process, you're practicing equanimity insofar as not getting caught up in the hindrance, not beating yourself up, not hating yourself, not being angry, not being upset that you are distracted. Remember what I said. Hindrances are your teachers. They will help you to identify and understand where your attachments lie so that you can let go of this. Finally, I want to contextualize the 6 R's through the understanding of the 4 Noble Truths. So as we understand the 4 Noble Truths, the first Noble Truth is that there is suffering, that there is dukkha, and this suffering can arise in a myriad of ways. It can arise through physical suffering. So while you're in meditation, you might have pain in your knees, pain in your back, pain in your shoulders, and that can distract you from the meditation. So my recommendation is from the get-go, find a posture that is most comfortable for you. That's the kind of physical suffering that is experienced even outside of sitting. You might stub your toe somewhere, or you might get sick or ill or have a disease or whatever it might be. And then there's mental suffering that can arise through anxiety, grief, and depression, and so on and so forth. And this kind of suffering is avoidable. In other words, physical suffering might be there, but if you add onto it the mental suffering, it only just makes it worse. So you stub your toe, you have a knee pain. The more you think about it, and the more you have this mentality around it, then you're adding mental suffering to it. You take that out of the equation and you forgive yourself for stubbing your toe and you move on instead of perpetuating all of this mental and conceptual proliferation. So the first Noble Truth is very simple, that there is suffering. The second Noble Truth is that there is a cause for suffering. And as we understand in the traditional formula of the 4 Noble Truths, that cause is craving. But I'm going to broaden that understanding because technically speaking, from the Pali, the second Noble Truth is samudaya. And samudaya essentially means the cause, that there is some kind of a cause. And yes, it can be craving, but as I go through it, you'll see it in a different way. The third Noble Truth is that there is a cessation of suffering. And that cessation of suffering is through the cessation of the causes of suffering, which can be craving, but it can be something else, as we'll talk about a little later. And finally, the 4th Noble Truth is this Eightfold Path, that there is a way out of the suffering, and to experience the cessation of suffering, the cessation of dukkha, one utilizes the Eightfold Path. And this Eightfold Path, as we just said, is right view, right intention, right speech, right behavior, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right collectiveness. So I'll go very briefly into what those 8 steps are, but essentially right view arises with the understanding of the 4 Noble Truths. Right intention is having a mindset that is filled with loving kindness and compassion, and filled with a mind that lets go, doesn't hold on to things. And so that's the true meaning of renunciation, accepting everything as it is without holding on to it, without trying to change it. Right speech is essentially not having false speech, not using harsh speech, not using abusive speech, and so on and so forth. So there's an acronym that one uses, which is to think before one speaks. And so THINK. And what that means is T stands for timely. Is it the right time to speak what you want to say, or is it the wrong time? H, is it honest? Is it truthful? Is it rooted in the truth? Is it I, intentionally wholesome? Is your intention to harm, or is your intention something else that is wholesome with your speech? N is for, is it necessary for the other person to know this right now? Is it necessary for you to speak this right now? And K is, can it be said with kindness? Can it be said with loving kindness? If you meet all of these parameters, only then would you want to speak. Otherwise, forever hold your peace, right? So from that right speech, you have right action. And that's essentially not harming individuals with intention, not intentionally harming or killing living beings. That is not indulging in sensual and sexual misconduct. But broadly speaking, sensual misconduct is becoming attached to the senses. So if you have wrong intention where the mind becomes attached to the senses, that gives rise to a mind that attaches itself and then can start to behave in unwholesome manner, in an unwholesome manner. And then finally, there is the not indulging in intoxicants. And so that means not indulging in things that can dull the mind, things that can excite the mind and agitate the mind. And so this is part of right action. So that is to say, not killing and not intentionally harming beings, not having sensual misconduct, and not indulging in intoxicants. Then you have right livelihood, which is to stay away from certain things that can harm other beings. So not trading in poisons, not trading in people, not trading in meat, not trading in alcohol, and not trading in weapons, things that can potentially harm other living beings. Right effort, as we just spoke about, is actually the 6 R's, but just contextualized in a different way by preventing any unwholesome states from arising, abandoning the already arisen unwholesome states, generating the wholesome states and maintaining those wholesome states through the practice of meditation. Mindfulness, so there's right mindfulness, and mindfulness is basically understanding and observing how mind's attention moves from one object to the other. When you have that mindfulness, you're able to then exercise meditation. That is to say, the recognition step is essentially mindfulness, being able to observe that the mind is distracted or being able to observe that the mind is collected in this moment. So that is all about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You can use the body, you could use the mind, you can use phenomena, and so on and so forth. Then collectedness is really this process of collecting the mind around a meditation object. In this case, that is the brahmaviharas, or in this case, loving kindness. Now, this is the whole of the Eightfold Path, and that whole of the Eightfold Path is the 4th Noble Truth. So coming back and returning to the 4 Noble Truths, I want to help you understand how the 6 R's help you to be able to fulfill the 4 Noble Truths. In the recognizing that there is a hindrance or unwholesome state arising, you recognize that there is suffering arising. In seeing that the attention to that hindrance is making that hindrance grow, you are understanding the 2nd Noble Truth, which is the samudaya, the cause. Craving is one aspect of it, but on a broader level, samudaya means cause, and attention is a fuel for growth of wholesome states as well as unwholesome states. So if your attention remains on the hindrance, it will continue to grow. But if your attention remains on loving kindness, that will continue to grow. So in recognizing and being able to release your awareness of that hindrance, you are understanding the 1st Noble Truth, that there is suffering present in the form of this hindrance, and the cause of it is this undue attention to that hindrance. In relaxing, you are letting go and you are experiencing in that moment of relaxing, as I said, this state of mind that is pure, the state of mind that is experiencing this mundane nibbana. And that mundane nirvana is nirodha. It is the cessation of suffering, because you have let go of your attention to the cause of that suffering, let go of your attention to that hindrance. You are now free from that hindrance, and the mind is purified. And so it is experiencing the third noble truth of that cessation, the tranquility of that mind that has experienced the cessation of craving and cessation of suffering. Now, it's interesting also, just a side note, when it comes to craving, craving can manifest in different ways. Craving can manifest, as I said, in the different hindrances, but it can manifest physically as well. It can manifest in the form of a tightness in the head. It can manifest in the tightness in the body. It can manifest in ways like, feeling stressed, feeling anxious, and so on and so forth. But when you recognize that kind of mental or physical tension in the head or the body, by recognizing that craving and letting it go, you're also tranquilizing the bodily formations that way and experiencing the third noble truth. The fourth noble truth, how are you experiencing the fourth noble truth? By using the 6 R's. Well, by using the entirety of the 6 R's, you are fulfilling right effort, which, as I said, is the encapsulated encapsulation of the Eightfold Path. It's at the heart of the path. It's only through right effort, as I said, that you can go from the wrong path to the right path. And so this is one way to understand the 6 R's. Now, to close that off, I'm just going to revise and review with you again, just for the moment, so that it's implanted in your head, is you use loving kindness as your anchor, as your meditation object. When go, because as soon as you have your attention on them, now you're distracted. But if there's no fuel of attention to those background thoughts, they will dissipate on their own. So don't worry about the background thoughts. Only understand when your mind becomes distracted from the object of meditation, you use the process of recognizing that, releasing your attention away from it, relaxing the mind and body, re-smiling, which is connected with the loving kindness, returning to that loving kindness, to the awareness of loving kindness, and continuing to be in that state of meditation, and then repeating anytime you get distracted again. So shall we share some merit? So if you could do it.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired through the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu.